Hello and welcome to another episode of the Plays podcast with me, Gemma Roots. Um, again, Jack isn't here for this episode, but he will be here in an episode's time. But today I am joined by another guest for this year, our second guest of the year, and I am joined by Tim Cox, who is one third of the three-piece alternative rock band from Newcastle upon Tyne, and that is Bosola. Hello,
Hey there, how you doing?
I'm good,
I
thank you.
good. I will say, and this is an exclusive, is that I'm now one quarter of it. We have added a fourth member
Oh
since
wow!
since we first chatted. So yeah, so we now have an additional guitarist called Austin. So you know, it's fast paced up here. But yeah, so we're a four piece now.
Exclusive news then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Tim, did you want to tell us a bit about how the band formed?
Yeah, so Persona has been. I had the idea for Persona for a long time. I've been in bands for a pretty long time now, about 10, 15 years really. And initially in bands in Cardiff and then in Bristol. Um, and Persona was always my sort of kind of, when there were songs which didn't fit into those bands, then I said I'll keep them for my solo project. Didn't actually have that solo project for about 10 years after I stopped being in kind of bands. But so yeah, I moved to Newcastle in 2016, and what I kind of really noticed really quickly about the Newcastle scene is that guitar music was a big part of it, which was like quite distinctly different from Bristol, where I'd lived just previously to moving to Newcastle, where there is a guitar music scene, but it's within lots of other scenes. Um, and yeah, it's got really good links with Teesside, Middlesbrough, Stockton, that sort of area, and Edinburgh and Glasgow. So you get quite a lot of, mid-size, small size, large size kind of tours around those areas. And it kind of got me thinking about kind of writing again. So I started writing songs or picking up the pieces of songs that I had left over from other bands in about 2018, and did like my first performance. And at that point, it was kind of a kind of folky, singer-songwritery sort of deal. Um, and I did a load of gigs around Newcastle before the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, I had just started to do some gigs with my mate Pete, who I'd met down the pub, and he's a multi instrumentalist, so he was just accompanying me on like accordion and flute and bass and banjo and that sort of thing. And we said, well, now that we're not doing so much work stuff, maybe we could go into the studio and actually kind of do a proper recording, because it would all be very kind of like garage band in the bedroom and that sort of stuff. So, and the feedback that we were getting from like when we're putting in demos to was like, these are good songs, but they're very badly recorded. So we decided to say, oh, we'll go into the studio and do it properly, quote unquote, and got a drummer in to do that. And it kind of turned into a much rockier affair. So we decided to recruit a permanent drummer called Emma, and she was in like loads of bands and brought quite a punk influence to it. So as I've added more members, so me, Pete, Emma, and now Austin, it's become quite high energy, and quite alternative rock rather than, me singing folky songs in silly tunings. So yeah, so we kind of formed, and we've been gigging since the pandemic lifted really. So September 2021 was our first gig, and we've done about 30 gigs since then, and released two EPs and a new single. So yeah, we've been doing quite a lot of stuff, and it's kind of constantly changing shape and, you know, forming into different things. And now we've added Austin in. It's added a bit more of a melodic element to it again. So that's exciting. So we formed as a band about 18 months ago, but we're continually reinventing that, which is nice, I think.
So as you've added new members over the last year and a half, what are your musical inspirations like? Have you all got different musicians that you all take inspiration from?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a songwriter. I guess a lot of my influences growing up were, you know, I think, you know, I'd love bands like the Manics and the Stone Roses when I was kind of a teenager, but like the Libertines really caught me, like, and made me pick up a guitar and start playing it. So like Libertines, then that led to the Smiths and the Lars. So they're, you know, those kind of, their approach to writing pop songs is so different from what you hear on the radio quite a lot of the time. So those are sort of the kind of foundational bands. But I think I've started, you know, I was very, you know, I think in my early 20s was really like, almost a one-man band sort of thing in terms of just listening to the Smiths all the time, because what they write is so varied. But that's loosened over time, and I've started listening to kind of more kind of American bands and bands like The Replacements, John Prine, the Lemonheads. I think have added kind of a roundness to that, to those musical influences. And I guess at the moment, the bands that I'm listening to that are active now, people like Fontaine's DC. I went to see Shame at the Boiler Shop in Newcastle like 10 days ago, and they were just awesome. So I like to take from lots of different styles of music and types of music, but in terms of what probably influences the songs of this band, that they're in that area. Like Pete and Emma, like their musical influences are so wide and so varied that I probably couldn't tell you in a short way. But you know, Pete's really into like prog metal and prog rock and that sort of stuff, and it's like a very melodic bass player, so that kind of comes through. And Emma is, you know, really into a punk music, and that kind of, that gives us a real energy and a real lift on stage. So yeah, lots of different bands really that we're picking from.
So talking about your musical inspirations, if you could collab with any musician, whether it's from the past or the present, who would it be?
This is a difficult one. I was listening to Tom Brogan from Silver Heart talking about this, and he was very concise about it. And I'm feeling the pressure with that. I think so. I mean, I would say, and this would probably change week by week, but I've just been over in Iceland, and actually we were messaging, and I was in a punk museum in Iceland, in Reykjavik, which was in this like public toilet, but basically it was partly a shrine to like Bjork and the Sugar Cubes. And I think like I've been listening a lot to Bjork over the last week or so, and just she is so left field with like her approach, like melody, the way that she uses her voice is so interesting. And like I knew Bjork more from her kind of sort of dance influenced stuff in the 90s, which is amazing and really rich and like very ethereal. But listening to her in the Sugar Cubes, which is just like kind of punk into sort of pop music in some ways band, and still like that voice, that approach to music is amazing. So, you know, I'd love to collaborate with her. I'd probably wither under that, under those lights. So, but I think like people that I'd love to collaborate with who are no longer with us, people like Nick Drake, just his way of playing the guitar and way of songwriting has, I'd argue, influenced how I approach songwriting. So, and just the way that his voice and playing is so English in some ways, although I'm not English myself, but it's really has a sense of place and time, and is also fairly timeless in its approach. So just spending time with Nick Drake and seeing how he did that and like why he came up with those approaches would be amazing, I think.
Oh, interesting. So you released your latest single, "Worth the Wait," at the beginning of March. Um, can you tell our listeners a bit about the song?
Yeah, so I think I think this is my favourite single that we've done. It was the first single that the current band lineup wrote together. Well, the three of us wrote together before Austin came in, and we recorded it about a year ago. And it probably represents how we are live more than anything else that we've got recorded. So as a song, I wrote it just in lockdown, and it's really about kind of the relationships in lockdown where you kind of get locked down together, and that is such a weird situation. And there are tensions that come with that, with not being able to escape that. But there's got to be some hope somewhere. That idea of like this will be worth the wait of doing this. So kind of it ends on the outro, which is quite hopeful about this is bad, but it will be worth it. The verses, I kind of come from a little bit of my angst and burgeoning hatred during lockdown of Paul Mescal and the Normal People series anyway, because my girlfriend got really obsessed with that. And like in lockdown, and I think in general, I compare quite badly to Conal Waldron or Paul Mescal, whichever way you're going to look at it. So that kind of sense of we're in this really difficult situation. There's this really romantic thing on TV. I can't live up to that. But we're like, it will get better. That's kind of what the song's about. So it's a bit tongue in cheek, a bit, emo-y in some ways, but trying to take that kind of Smithsy approach on that. It's sad, but there's a humour to it. So yeah, that's kind of what the song's about, and I guess the people who've listened to it and given us feedback on it say it's a bit like Teenage Fan Club, The Cure, that sort of big kind of 90s sprawling sound, which I take as a massive compliment. So I'll go with that.
So is that the way that you wrote and produced that song? Is that kind of the process that you go through with any of your music? Do you have a specific process of songwriting?
Yeah, so I mean, it tends to be that I'll sit down with a guitar when I've had an idea that kind of keeps looping back to me, or is difficult to resolve just through thinking through it rationally. And I think putting it to and I usually sit down with a detuned guitar and just try and pick out a melody which goes with the vocal phrase that I've got, and then build the rest of the song around that. I'll then do a recording of that on my phone and send it to the other guys, who then will come to our practice room and start to piece that together. I've certainly, out the four of us, I'm the least musically literate, so it comes from quite a raw place. So it does take some arranging, and sometimes I need to be told that's just a bit of another song. You can't do that. But yeah, and then we kind of work it out. But yeah, I mean that's how we tend to do it. And then once we've played it a few times and we've done it live, then we'll kind of say, yeah, that's had a really good reaction, and that's giving us a real energy about that to then go and sit and play this over and over again for a day in the studio. So that tends to be the approach now. With the majority of the songs that we did, though, I had them all written before we went into the studio, and then they sort of developed in the studio. So, but I would say the way that I described first is the way that we do it now, and we are about to go back in to the studio over the next few months and record about 3 or 4 more songs.
So how long does it take you then? Is it quite a long process to produce a song, or do you do it quite quick?
I think I can write it pretty quickly. I mean, I can, write a song in 10 minutes, and then we arrange it pretty quickly, but we are quite careful about going out and playing it live, because we know that over time it will develop and get better. And I think there's a sense with some of the songs that we've got recorded and we released on the EP, which was before we were, touring and playing live, that those songs are now better than they were when we recorded them. So there's that kind of sense of progress, and that's just an experience thing. In lockdown, I just wanted to get as many songs down as possible and do an album and all of those sort of things. But I think I've learned that playing it with other musicians and having that sort of conversation with an audience about what they like and what they don't like actually makes the song so much better. So I think the initial ideas can be pulled together quite quickly, but it's tailored over time. So we do tend to take our time now about going in and doing things and producing them. And we usually get, I don't do the production myself. We always hire a producer to do that, because I have no ideas what all the little buttons mean on desks and stuff like that. And it's also good to get that other person's view about where that song could go, and that's been really helpful for us.
Brilliant. So you were talking earlier about your latest EP, Thomas and Judas, which was released back in October 2022.
Yeah.
We like to ask this question a lot, and we seem to get a similar answer all the time. But what is your favourite song off the EP?
Is the answer "You Can't Make Me Choose"?
I thought you might say that.
No. I have thought about this. I mean, I think my favourite song on that thing is probably the opening track, "Ophelia Headstrong," because it kind of came at a time. It was the newest. That was the newest track on it, and it encapsulated the energy that we were going towards a bit more. I really like all the other songs, but it feels a bit more of a kind of statement song, and it's a song about it's a song about growing up in small mining towns and people putting you down and not wanting you to make the best of your life, and that can be difficult. But within those towns, there are people who fully support you and don't quite understand what you're doing, but they'll help you to do that. And I think that's certainly been the case with music stuff and other stuff in my life, where people can try and put you down and say you're not ever going to be able to do that, but there's other people who are like, you could definitely do that, and part of being headstrong and driven is a really good thing. So people really tend to react to that well, and yeah, I'd say of the 4 songs, I
Mm.
really like that as a song, and it works in that big well, it's not quite punky, but garage rock sort of way. But I could sit down and play that to you on like a nylon string guitar, and it have a completely different feel, and the focus would be different. So I think it's probably the best song on that. But I'd probably said different things depending on what I was promoting at the time. But given that at the moment I'm not promoting anything from that EP, then yeah, it'd probably be Ophelia Headstrong.
So, with an EP, then, do you go in thinking, right, I'm going to have so many songs on this EP, let's make them? Or do you make loads of songs and then decide what song's going to go?
I think so. I guess when I did the initial EP, so How Sick I Became, Running from Myself, what I was struggling to get was kind of gigs beyond 1 or 2 venues.
Mm.
And I think that having it's basically like a bit like a demo disc to say, look, this is all the types of music I could play, because I was sort of being typecast as a sort of Lewis Capaldi type, and I don't think I'm that talented as a singer, B, that genre, and it meant that I was being paired with bands that like it didn't quite fit. So I wanted to make a statement like, no, this is the alternative rock element that we could do. So going in, so the first 4 tracks was really about attention grabber, because haven't grown up in the Newcastle scene, so it helped to have something that was pretty well produced to give to people. It did have that impact. The second EP was the songs which I didn't include on the first EP, but already had written, and would have been within the set that I was doing. And that, yeah, and they just they kind of fit quite nicely together, because the first 4 songs are about kind of finding identity and like finding your authentic self, and the second group of songs are about kind of experiences of like betrayal and doubt, self-doubt, and those 2 things go together quite well, but need separating for me thematically. So those, when I did the EPs, that was the idea. During the recording of the second EP, our first EP got signed on a distribution deal by Cammy McNeish and to Liberator Records. So that spurred us on with the second EP, and they're both out physically through to Liberator Records now. So you can, and that's kind of expanded our horizons to Glasgow-based stuff as well. But I think the conversations we've been having within the band is like, well, we've done 2 EPs, we should do an album now. But now the kind of the thought is, well, do we then write 10 new songs and that be the album, or do we combine the first 2 EPs and put other things on? So, I think that with the first 2 EPs, it was my thing. These are my songs, whereas now we're more of a band. So
Yeah.
I can't dictate anymore.
So you saying about the future, it kind of brings me on to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the plan for the near future? Are you just going to focus on gigging, or going to do more songwriting?
Yeah, so I mean, we've done some pretty heavy songwriting since October, really. So we've probably got 4 or 5 new songs that we'd love to get down on record, and either release those as a constant stream of singles to try and build that capacity, try and get on some festival bills, and develop a stronger fan base, so that we develop that sound a little bit more, and we can have a sense of when is the right time to release an album that people actually want to consume. So I think we've got a bit of an 18-month plan, where in 18 months we'll have released a load of songs, we'll hopefully done progressively more and kind of higher status gigs, I guess. And then we'll be in the place to hopefully release something which then we might be able to do some sense of like a more national tour around. But it's all incremental stuff, and I can get really excited and spend all my money. But that's what life's for, right?
So in terms of gigs then, for our listeners that may want to come and see you live,
Yeah.
where can we catch you in the near future?
So this one might be a bit too soon. This might be before this actually goes out. But we've got a gig on Saturday in Newcastle at it's like an all-dayer event for a local music zine. It's at the Mosaic Tap in Newcastle, and we're opening that. So we're on at 6 p.m. So get down soon. It's early to that. So that's one we're doing. Then we've got a gig at the Lover Fiend in Newcastle, which is on the 30th of March, which is again a multi-band gig. And then we've got the big one that we're kind of gearing up for and getting really buzzed for is the 22nd of April. We're headlining Bobix, which is also in Newcastle. And we're that'll be kind of a bit of a kind of big launch of us as a 4-piece, really. Austin is going to play in the next 2 or 3 gigs before that, but this will be like our statement that we're a 4-piece. We're doing things slightly differently musically as a result of that, and we're really excited by that. So those are the sort of 3 near gigs that we've got, but we are looking at playing in Glasgow again this year, looking at potentially going to Nottingham. We were in London last year, so we might go down there. Bristol and Cardiff are also options, because that's where my kind of family and friendship group lives. So we're looking at those options and thinking about what's the best thing to do. So hopefully for your listeners, we will be somewhere soon, around where you're playing on the bill somewhere, in the next 12 months for sure.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's good to hear that you've been gigging a lot and you've got plans to do more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like it's the most fun thing. Like, once you get over the nerves, like playing a gig, connecting with people that you just don't know, and there's that sort of bond, as long as it goes well, that really gets that energy and that connection. And I love live music for that. And I think actually, although live music has been had a difficult few years post-pandemic, I think actually the music that's out now is really quite exciting, quite diverse, and I think the UK is in a pretty healthy state in relation to that. Maybe not in anything else.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a relationship between those 2 things. So it feels like there's a wave of bands that are going to be breaking in the next sort of 5 years. Hopefully we're one of them, where it's a kind of new wave of Britpop or whatever it is, which is slightly different than the kind of Oasis and Blurs who've had their reunions and all of those sort of things. And that'd be exciting, because I think as a country we're really good at producing really good music, and providing spaces for American artists to come out, and Canadian artists come and play to an audience that's receptive. So it's not just the bands, it's also the people who go and see it. So it's really good that now more than ever we have more of this kind of media like you're providing, which is helping people to engage and understand the bands as they're trying to work really hard and get it out to a broad audience. So thanks so much for that.
That's really nice. Thank you.
Well, I tried.
Well, I'm sure that if you do a gig around London area, I'm sure myself and Jack will come and support you.
Well, that'd be awesome. Well, I'll let you know, and I'll try and get you on the guest list if we play down here for sure.
That would be wonderful because a lot of the musicians that we've had on, we have said that we would love to come and see you all in person.
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome.
So, Tim.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And for all of our listeners, where can we find you on social media and all the streaming services?
Yeah, so you can find us. We're pretty much on all the streaming services. So if you look at Bosola, now Bosola is unusual to spell, so I'll spell it out if that's okay.
Yeah,
It's Bosola. So that's Bosola. But most of our Instagram, Facebook, it's Bosola UK. That's our handle. Now, our Twitter is actually B0S0LA. That's how you find us. So those are the three: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the places that we're most active on social media. We're on Spotify, we're on Bandcamp, we're on SoundCloud, we're on Apple Music and Tidal and all of those sort of things. So we are there if you look for us. And there's only like one other band that seems to come up when you type, and they're like, they're like a band from New York from the early noughties. So our logo tends just to be Bosola in black and white. So that's what's to look for.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you for that.
No problem.
So thank you for coming on again.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And for all of our listeners out there, thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.